All right, let's move on with page 3. This section is new forces in medieval Europe. And we'll go to number 25 today. So changes in agriculture were brought about by some new inventions. The water mill, windmill was used to grind grain, a heavier plow, going from a wooden plow to an iron plow. I believe it was called the Mulborer plow, something like that. A new collar harness for horses and horseshoes. This was a big improvement, so instead of having to rely on oxen, they could use horses, which were faster, and that allowed them to get their work done a little quicker. And all of these inventions were really good, and they helped to boost food production. And we'll talk later how having more food allowed the population to increase. People are healthier, living longer, that type of thing. Serfdom began to decline as they were granted more freedoms, and they also began to think of the land as their own. They became tenant farmers, which means that they paid a rent for the land, so they were able to use the land, pay rent on it. I assume, I'm positive of this, I think, wouldn't make much sense otherwise, that if they're paying rent on the land, then they were able to sell the crops from that land to make money. So, again, a rapid growth in population caused a demand for more goods. So why did the population increase? As I mentioned previous, that increased amount of food allowed the population to increase. So if you have more people, then obviously there's a need for more goods. You know, us today, we've just got to have stuff. We got to have more stuff that we buy and pick up. With trade expanding, with this demand for more goods, trade expanded. They had to expand trade to meet that need of acquiring more goods. And this also led to new business practices. Partnerships were formed. So you could have a large group of merchants pool their funds and resources together, and they might be able to finance a large-scale project. Rather than just one person trying to pay for something, they could gather together. And this happens today. It's called a co-op, where you might have a group of farmers, buy a tractor. Tractor can be $100,000, $200,000. And so if you have a group that together buy the tractor, because sometimes the tractors are sitting and you just alternate use of it and work that out. That was kind of like the partnerships. Money changing, and this eventually led to our banking system. So you would have depositing of money, bills of exchange, and then you could go and get cash. Guilds were organizations that were formed by merchants and craft workers. These were organized and created to protect its members and to set business policies, regulate hours, set prices, any other situation or thing that was felt needed within that job. They could, group together, have discussion on it, and hopefully come to a conclusion. Today we call this type of thing would be a union. I used to be part of a teachers union here. I am no longer, but it was fine. I'm really fine either way. But plumbers are part of those today, electricians. If you're back east in Michigan or Tennessee, you probably belong to the United Auto Workers Union, one of the biggest that there is. So, they would decide to have a strike or a walkout or a work stoppage, different things if they felt there was a problem within that occupation. So an apprentice, this was a trainee. They were a trainee to a guild master, and probably age 7 or 8 on average. They weren't paid any wages, but they were provided a place to sleep and they were fed. So bed and board were given to them. So I guess the learning of the skill was their payment. Then you became a journeyman, and that was a day laborer, which was a salaried worker. And I believe you had to be a journeyman for 15 years, and then you would display your craft or whatever that you were doing to a guild master, and they would approve you at that time to then become a guild master. So you had to work quite a few years and then demonstrate that you knew that craft. So, okay. Charter, these are very important. Document granting a group of people certain rights and privileges, and usually it came from the Lord to the townspeople. They paid the Lord or king a large sum of money, sometimes to allow them to pass some of these charters and grant them these privileges. Okay, so before we had nobility and peasants. And as things were changing, time was moving on, there started to be a new class of people, and that was the middle class. So this is by the year 1000, this new class was appearing. It was made up of master artisans, there were traders, merchants, their families, that they all made up this middle class people. So again, between the nobles and the peasants, they started to be more educated, have skills that, you know, required and allowed them to get more money than just a common laborer. So kings grew stronger. I guess there's a point where they realized maybe these local lords were starting to gain some power and influence, and they wanted to have that power back. So they reduced the power of the lords and took away the land that they had granted to them. People then started transferring their loyalty to the monarch and not that local lord. Royal rulers could impose the peace and unity that were needed for trade to continue. And so as we look at Europe, there's some big countries and there are some really small countries. And I think, you know, that kind of came out of the situation with these small local lords and having these small sections of land. So for a lot of them, it maybe didn't revert back to the king, and some of these were allowed to keep these small portions. So finishing up, we've got Angles or Anglo-Saxons, Angles, and some Vikings. They eventually set up kingdoms on the southern part of the island of Great Britain, which of course we know to be England today. The Anglo-Saxon King Edward died without an heir to his throne, and a council chose his brother-in-law Harold to rule in his place, but the Duke of Normandy also claimed the English throne, and warfare broke out, and that's where we'll finish up and continue on to our final page with that. So that finishes page 3. Thank you.